Diu hadagan kinawas hinudi kiang gats age gustudi quilagin Vancouver studi ija. So my Haida name is Kinawas, Carrie Anne Vanderhoop, and I'm the Algittens Massa Inlet Eagle clan. My mother is Kajuth, Evelyn Vanderhoop. My grandmother, my Nani, is Ilskalis Dolores Churchill, and my great-grandmother is Selena Adams Paradovich. I grew up mostly on the East Coast in the community that my father's family is from, and that's our ancestral village there as well. So I've been privileged to live on my ancestral lands and grow up there and be raised within the community. So my educational background is I went to school mostly in Massachusetts. I had a little bit of time where I was in high school in Ketchikan, Alaska, and that's where I was born. And then I moved back and did my undergraduate degree at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst, where I studied literature and sociology. I also did a little bit of education there. And when I graduated, I moved in with my mother, Evelyn, who was living in Washington State at the time. And she was weaving textile, Northwest Coast native textile style weaving. And it was her first Naheen style robe, which is commonly known as chilkat. And I moved in with her to apprentice and learn how to weave because that was what was important to me at the time. And so I spent about a year and a half learning the techniques and weaving with her. And then I went back to grad school, and I went to grad school at Harvard University Graduate School of Education, where I got my master's in a self-designed program studying really the sociology of schools and education, trying to learn a little bit about how I could influence educational programming in my communities, and also working with public schools on teaching to more diverse student bodies. So. My focus really is with the curriculum that I've been developing. It's quite a large project because of the scope of the project. So I'm working on the UBC 23-24 cultural safety, Indigenous cultural safety curriculum, and it's a combination of both online modules and in-person workshops. So the each online module is about a 2-hour self-directed learning experience, and then the workshops are 2-hour in-person interprofessional workshops that are included. Is about 10 different health science programs that participate, and they're co-facilitated by an Indigenous facilitator and then a facilitator from the different programs. So it's really been quite a journey. We started development about a year and a half ago, and we offered the first quartile, which is the first few modules in in-person session, this past September, and we're still in the process of developing. So now I'm working on online module 4 in the last in-person session. So it's been taking up a lot of my time and my focus. So that's really what I'm working on now at the center, and will be for the next little bit. I feel very fortunate that I was able to grow up in my communities and on the lands of my ancestors. I think it's been really important for me to continue on and have relationships with the people in my community and with the land. So really, I wake up in the morning and do lots of the same things that my ancestors would do, and it's a quite close community that I grew up in on my father's side. And on my mother's side, I think because I grew up mostly away from that when I was visiting with family, it always felt like it was very important for my family members and my grandmother to always let me know like who my family was on Haida Gwaii, made sure I knew our family stories and our songs and our history, and so they really did kind of press those values and that history, so that I was always aware. And in both places, like on the West Coast, because I've been bi-coastal back and forth my whole life, it's kind of remote communities. Like where I grew up on my father's side of the family, there was maybe 300 people in the town, and it was mostly our relatives and neighbors, and doors were always open, and people took care of each other and really kind of came together for community events. And I think that's the way it is now. And I have a daughter. My daughter is 8 years old, and she's kind of growing up between Vancouver and Haida Gwaii. We do take her out to the East Coast to visit as much as possible. But I think she has the best of both worlds, kind of growing up with her community and her family up on Haida Gwaii and Old Masset, where there's this beautiful school, and it's right there on the reserve, and she gets to learn Haida at the school. They get to participate in cultural events and learn some of the history, and they get to have a lot of their education out on the land. So that's really important to me. So one of the things that get asked in this work that I do is why Indigenous cultural safety? Why not immigrant cultural safety? Or why not LGBTQ cultural safety? Yeah. And so Indigenous cultural safety aims to address the specific impacts that colonization has had on the Indigenous people here in Canada. And I would say, especially coming from the remote northern communities, that's where I was living when I was pregnant with my daughter. And I could see and experience that there was a lack of services, and there was also a lack of communication. So for me, my experience had been that the most consistent health care that I received was that there was a prenatal program at the clinic, the village clinic, the Old Masset Village Clinic. And there we saw a couple of nurses and a doctor would come in. But for my prenatal visits at the hospital in Masset, I never saw the same doctor twice, because there was always the rotation of doctors. And because I have a complicated medical history and medical conditions, I suffer from rheumatoid arthritis and lupus and Sjogren's, so that I had like what they call an at-risk pregnancy. So all of this history would have to be relearned from every new person that I saw. So I have this big file, and I have doctors that really, don't have the familiarity with me or with my case. And at the health clinic in the village, they have a file on me too, but there's no communication between the village clinic and the hospital. So there's that, and I think a lot of Indigenous people like the consistency and like that they know who to expect when they go into the clinics in the village. And then when you're up there and you have a rotating doctors, it's not as it really can compromise the healthcare that you receive. So, and in addition, I couldn't have Rosalie at home on Haida Gwaii. I had to come down here to Vancouver to the women's hospital. And so there's the whole travel. You don't have your support system. And, when you're having your first baby, it's kind of a really special time. And to be away from your family, to be away from your land, to be away from the foods that you're used to eating, to be away from all of that, you can see that there's kind of a breakdown in how health could be compromised just from the stress of that. And also that you should be able to have an escort that travels with you and takes you down. But it's like there's a financial strain as well there, because in my time where I had to be down here, for overall I think it was about 5 weeks. that there was a financial strain, and that also my escort wasn't covered for the thing. So we're both taken out of the community, and we're down here for quite a long stretch of time. So, I mean, it's things like that that can impact a community. And this is just in my one personal experience. And I was down here to get monitored about once a month because I had to have a lot of tests and stuff in my condition. One of the other things that I address in the course that I'm developing, the Centre for Excellence in Indigenous Health, is there's many barriers to healthcare for Indigenous people, and one of the stronger ones that we aim to address is the stereotypes and racism that we see in healthcare, and that's a very real barrier that people experience. A lot of people don't want to even access healthcare because they don't want to be receiving differential treatment and be disrespected in the healthcare system. So that I see is a very big barrier. Also, I think that most Canadians don't realize that the healthcare benefits that Canadians receive are not the same ones that Indigenous people and First Nations people of Canada receive. Even there's differences between First Nations and Inuit, non-status, and Métis people. So there's different, there's a complex health governance issues that are at play that have developed over time in history with the relationship that these Indigenous groups have with the Canadian government and with the territories in which they live. So in regards to an Indigenous perspective and a Western perspective of medicine and health and wellness, I would only be able to speak to what I believe in the values and the knowledge that I've been given as a Haida person, as a Quinawapanui person. I think there is a tendency to want to generalize Indigenous people, and just here in British Columbia alone, we have more than 200 Indian bands, and they all have very distinct beliefs. And I think that one thing I would say is true of us all is that we have a strong relationship to our environment, and our worldviews on health and wellness really are connected to what our relationship is with our environment. So our foods and our traditional medicines are the things that naturally grow in our territories. And I think the idea of food as medicine is an important one. I think that the idea and way of life of living in relationship with the land, in the seasons, and on the land is one that you're going to see kind of quite across the board in terms of how to live in a good way. There's lots of different customs that people are aware of, things like the sweat lodge or the medicine wheel concepts. So I think we have our own distinct ways of keeping ourselves well and healthy and in balance. And that balance piece is really encompassing of the whole person, and looking at ourselves as our physical, spiritual, mental well-being is all kind of part of that. I think that the Western way of looking at a symptom or a list of symptoms and wanting to find a solution, an answer, wanting to be able to identify what the problem is and take steps to fix it, based on knowledge that they may have learned in medical school. Where I think that what I would say is that with a Haida way and a Haida perspective, that we're looking at more of a overall sense of wellness and how everything is connected. We have this principle or this value of interconnectedness. so everything is connected to everything else. And when you look at that and how things break down, that's where we may see people being unwell, not having those connections. When these things, when there's a breakdown or a disconnect or a disruption, that's where we see where all these ailments and symptoms may come from. Also, I think that idea that there may be a conflict with, say, treatments and treatment options. So we've seen, everybody's kind of seen in the media and the news that, families might want to opt for a more traditional treatment and not Western treatment. And there's a conflict, especially when it comes to, say, elders or young children. What would be the best, and is it neglectful not to go with what Western medicine recommends? So I think that there's just a lot that could be resolved. There's with just a little bit of research and education and more understanding about what those treatments are, or what the medicines are, or how they would interact with different Western medicines. But I wouldn't want to say that I advocate one over the other. I feel like a lot of times Western medicine is either or, but it doesn't always have to be. And it's better to have open communication about that than not open communication. And I think another thing that conflicts generally is the whole relationship piece. So when you go to a doctor, the doctors don't necessarily think that, relationship is going to be a really important factor, so I'm going to take my time and I'm going to listen and I'm going to want to learn more about this person and their whole being, their whole lives, and how that impacts their health. There's not a lot of time for that in Western medicine, where I think that when we take care of each other in Indigenous communities, we really invest our time and we invest our energy into that. So that's a different model as well. It's already becoming that as we become more aware, as we become more informed about these different ways of also with Western medicine kind of coming to those understandings as well, that these things are important to the health and well-being and the healing process of these of our Indigenous populations. I think I'm lucky enough to be working in exactly that, on exactly that. I think that just bringing people to understanding, I think it's important that we do look at and reflect on the history and reflect on the biases that many people have because of a dominant narrative that we've been exposed to here in Canada about Indigenous people, and addressing some of those stereotypes that come from those narratives and what we see in the media and what our histories are. And addressing that is a big part of improving healthcare for Indigenous people. And also, I think that more Indigenous people in the healthcare field, when we think about the social structures of our communities in the way that they were before, they were healers. They were people that were historians. They were people that were, researchers, and they were people that knew how to navigate the stars and knew things about the universe and things about the weather patterns and the systems. And I like to go back to the supernaturals, and I think there's a little bit of language challenges when we talk about that. But when I talk about the supernaturals, I talk about those weather patterns, about those systems in nature, about those beings in nature that have taught us everything that we know. And I think that part of it is that we're reconnecting it with our traditional roles, and so we need those Indigenous healers that can really provide healthcare, informed healthcare in that Western system, but with the values of their and the knowledge that they have from their history, from their connection with their territories. So that would be, I think, my ideal situation. If I could walk into a space where I could feel like somebody there was kind of walking in both of those systems. I'm an optimist, and I really do feel like I hope that people that are coming into this field really do want to do good work and really do care about the people that come into their practice. And I think that if you're well informed and you have that understanding that we can get there and work together, those relationships can be built, and we're getting there.